I believe that the United States this is going to ramp up where we're going to become involved in this because there's going to be a false flag event or a nuclear exchange. So let's go to the Russians sent a missile into Poland and 2 people died. Remember that one?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
A total lie. But my God, 2 people died. Oh, did you see the numbers came out? 600,000 Tigrians were killed in the Ethiopian War, started by the clown that was after he won the Nobel Peace Prize. How about the 377,000 Yemenis that, according to the United Nations, have been killed? Half of them, according to the United Nations, children under the age of 6 years old. Oh, but 2 people in Poland were killed by the Russians. Let's unite. That's what I'm concerned about.
No, listen, that's legitimate. And you know as well as I do that if we go back through American history, it's not difficult to discover that in 1965, we claimed that there was an incident in the Gulf of Tonkin when there was none. And before anybody could say investigate, we had effectively declared war. And Johnson began committing troops to Vietnam. We always have this problem with the truth when it comes to the outbreak of warfare. So I think you're right. I think we have every reason to be concerned. The good news is this, and this is going to sound strange to some of your listeners. The Russians are not fools. They do understand what nuclear war means. They have no interest in it. I don't think the majority of people in Washington have any interest in it, but the concern has always been the same thing. Once it becomes abundantly clear that Ukraine is crushed and Russian forces are advancing across that country, will we risk a direct confrontation on the conventional level with the Russians, for which we're completely unprepared? We can't even recruit for the United States Armed Forces at this point. We only have 457,000 men in the United States Army. Of that number, you have perhaps 120, 130,000 that are actually combat troops. All the services are in bad shape thanks to 20 years of stupid wars, also based on a series of lies that we don't need to go into. So now I think it is a real danger once this becomes clear that someone in the White House will say, oh gosh, we have to do something. We can't just sit here. We have to do something. Well, something is not an answer. Something is not a strategy. We've never had a strategy. We've never had a strategy for any of this. We said, well, we're going to punish the Russians. And then they made the mistake of assuming because the Russians went in initially in the hopes of just inducing negotiations that they were weak and stupid. Now the Russians are giving them what they don't want. Total war in Ukraine. War, war, war. We don't understand it. We haven't fought in it for decades. And we need to stay out of it because this war is unlike anything we have seen since World War II.
And again, you see what's going on, how NATO keeps that little clown boy, Stoltenberg, just yesterday, more weapons, more weapons, more weapons. The UK just came out today that we're going to keep sending more weapons, more weapons, more weapons. And you mentioned about the Gulf of Tonkin, that lying little lowlife McNamara lied, that arrogant guy, about it happening. And again, what the hell are we doing in the Gulf of Tonkin? What if the Vietnamese were in the Gulf of Mexico?
Exactly.
You know, I'm an American. I believe in the founding fathers like George Washington. You read his farewell address. Do not become involved in any foreign entanglements, particularly what's going on in Europe. This stuff has been going on for centuries between these people. Exactly. We're not going to solve them, and they're not our problems. And when you're talking about the Ukraine border dispute, what is this going on for 300 years? They're taking down the statue of Catherine the Great. Oh, Catherine the Great, Odessa, 1750. I mean, it's been going on back and forth. And like you said, Russia's made no threat to invade the rest of Europe. And then you have this clown boy playing the prime minister or whatever over there in Lithuania, or Latvia rather. Latvia's president has urged Western countries to step up military support for Ukraine. He's at the Davos conference. Yeah. And you're seeing at the Davos conference from Zelensky's wife to one clown after another, pumping up more war.
Well, everybody's emoting. Nobody is thinking. And that's the first problem. And the second problem is that they harbor delusions. And what are these delusions? Well, number one, that we are all powerful, that we are invincible, that nothing bad can happen to us. Today, there were also comments in the New York Times about, well, the Biden administration is warming to the idea that we should help the Ukrainians target and attack places inside Russia itself, inside Crimea especially. There's no sense at all that we're not sitting here in isolation. We can be harmed. There are many ways for the Russians to attack us. They have exercised extraordinary restraint. I doubt very seriously that we would exercise that kind of restraint if there were large numbers of Russians or Chinese in Mexico beefing up a Mexican army designed to attack us.
You know, this is the magazine, the Trends Journal, when it used to be a quarterly. Spring 2014, when the United States started the overthrow of, this is an article by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, former Assistant Treasury Secretary under Ronald Reagan. Washington is driving the world to the final war. World hegemony is not a right America has earned. He goes on to say, Washington concluded that Russia needed to be confronted with or distracted by problems that would leave the Russian government less confident or able to counter Washington's aggression elsewhere. Ukraine presented the perfect opportunity for Washington to advance its hegemonic agenda. In a speech at the National Press Club last December, which was December 2013, Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland boasted that Washington had invested $5 billion in non-governmental organizations in Ukraine for the purpose of NGOs to teach democracy. You remember that. You remember her speech.
Yeah,
people have no idea. They have no idea.
Yeah, these are the unelected bureaucrats who are making policy. And I don't really think, quite frankly, President Biden is even remotely involved in any of this. I think he just is handed things to read, and he reads it into the teleprompter or the television cameras. So the people around him and the people at the State Department, over at Department of Defense that are the quote unquote Biden handlers, they're running this show. Nobody elected them. No one has consulted the American people. I dare say that if you consulted the American people on the wisdom of war with Russia, you would get a resounding no, overwhelmingly the majority, but they're not consulted.
No, the people have no idea what's going on. CNN keeps running this article about this guy Walsh or whatever that killed his wife. What do I care about this stuff? That's not news. Elvis Presley's daughter died. Great, that's good for entertainment news, but don't tell me that's news. A football player gets tackled and gets a heart attack, and it's news for a week and a half. But the people don't have a clue what's going on.
It distracts everyone from what's really important.
Yeah.